It is now my pleasure to introduce our commencement speaker. Our speaker is a multi-hyphenate artist, a producer, a director, an actor of stage and screen, whose career is remarkable not only for its longevity, but also for the consistency with which our speaker centers smart, courageous, commanding, authoritative women who literally change and save lives. Our speaker is a person who has lived within our collective consciousness for decades. For those of you who were born, in 2000 and afterwards, she has always appeared on your television screens, always. For those of us born before 2000, she was there, but with a bit more subtle influence. I can't say with any great certainty, but I know that for me, my first encounter with Kim Raver was likely as a very, very young kid watching Sesame Street. I had to have seen our speaker during her multiple seasons as a Sesame Street kid. And for most people, let's think about this. Hanging out with iconic figures like Broadway Joe Namath, with Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch and others in the background, those experiences would be a lifetime highlight. But for our speaker, that's just where her story begins. Like many of you who discovered your passion for the arts as children, you can see a similar discovery in Kim Raver. After Sesame Street, there was the first all-children's theater, where socially conscious off-Broadway luminaries like Elizabeth Swados created original works entirely for young artists. And then there was schooling, at a boarding school known for educating strong, accomplished women, like Betty Davis, Valerie Jarrett, and many, many others. And then, of course, there was BU, Boston University, where Kim forged lifetime friendships with artists, many of whom she continues to work with. After graduating from BU in 1991, our speaker had to hustle. She worked the gig jobs that allowed an artist to remain available for auditions. A few years at it, she landed her first TV movie about the Menendez brothers. There was the occasional commercial, and then a year later, Broadway, Holiday in 1995. And the following year, recurring episodes of Central Park West, and then Law and Order, and more. Now, so we are all busy people. But I'll say that Kim Raver is among the busiest of the most busy people in this room. So let's imagine that we're a school, right? So let's imagine that we decided to pursue a major in Kim Raver studies, right? And every week, this is what we do in school, right? Every week, our assignment is going to be to watch one of her screen credits as a professional actor. And then we're going to gather and we're going to talk about it, which is actually what millions of people do every week with her work. So with more than 450 acting credits to her name across 40 different television shows and movies and feature films, we're talking about 30 semesters, 15 years to complete our degree. And this is attending only to her work as an actress. So what is extraordinary about Kim Raver's body of work is how often she creates opportunities for us to reflect on who and where we are as a society, often from a perspective centered from that of a strong, powerful woman. In the television series Third Watch, the events of 9/11, the attack and collapse of the World Trade Towers in 2001, that occurred in the third season, just before the third season that Kim had in Third Watch. That next season helped millions of viewers to process their emotions over that tragedy. Right? So people actually tuned in. They watched Kim Raver's work to process through the emotions that they were feeling in the wake of 9/11. In the series 24, questions, concerns, and anxieties related to global security and domestic terror were staged and gripping, seeming real time. And again, her work helped people believe that agents, like her character, were on the watch again to keep us safe. And of course, the experiences of the Iraq War and the societal challenges of the past 15 years, including COVID, have been recreated and worked through in Grey's Anatomy. There are so many roles, you can pick your favorite shows, and more likely than not, Kim Raver has helped tell that story. Ray Donovan, Bones, NCIS Los Angeles, ER, The Practice, Spin City, and of course, Lipstick Jungle. An industrious person, Kim Raver has been especially busy over the past few years. Earlier this year, she directed her first episode of Grey's Anatomy, an episode in which her character, Dr. Teddy Altman, was managing the chaos as chief of surgery. In short, she was calling the shots both on screen and behind the camera. And her work as a producer has only intensified. In the past 5 years, she has produced 5 television movies, including directing one, with 3 of them emerging from a unique and quite special partnership between Raver, New York Times bestselling novelist Jane Green, and Lifetime, the network, to feature stories that center women protagonists in women-centric narratives. I could go on. There's so much more I could say. There is her work on stage at the Williamstown Theater Festival. There is her advocacy in support of women's health. There is her consistent efforts to encourage people to register to vote and to go out and actually vote in elections. But we're here not to listen to me talk about Kim Raver. We're here to listen to Kim Raver. So please join me in welcoming our Convocation speaker, Kim Raver.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Dean Harvey, for that generous introduction and the invitation to be here today. It is a privilege to be among you and these esteemed faculty members. Wow, hello, hello. It is truly a thrill and an honor to be back at my alma mater to celebrate the class of 2023. You did it! As someone who once sat where you're sitting, I know firsthand how hard you have worked to get here. I know what it's like to train here, to explore who you are as a person and as an artist. And in thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, I thought about what would be and what would have been the most useful thing for me to have heard when I graduated. And I came up with this. If you buy a couch, make sure it fits through your door. I learned a lot here, but that was not taught in any of my classes. Okay, let me explain. So after I left BU, I moved back to New York. I had 0 money, and I spent my last few dollars on this beautiful, giant, rose-covered couch. But when it arrived at my apartment, it couldn't fit through the door. I didn't think to measure it. I mean, it never even occurred to me that that might be a problem. And if my graduation speaker had offered this very practical piece of advice, I would have avoided a huge headache and I wouldn't have had to pay to repair the damage I did to the door frame in order to get that couch inside. This is probably not the message that you were expecting or hoping for today. It never comes up when I talk to young alumni. In fact, the question I'm most often asked is, Kim, how did you do it? How did you go from a BU College of Fine Arts graduate to a working artist? And really meaning, how do I do that too? So I will share some thoughts on that as you transition from BU students to BU alumni. But I'll be honest, none will be as guaranteed to have positive results as measure furniture before you buy it, and its corollary, don't use a sledgehammer to increase the height of your apartment door frame. Here's the thing. Some careers, they have very clear paths. You go to medical school, you do your residency, you become a doctor. You go to law school, join a firm, work your way up to partner. But as artists, we have chosen a profession for which there is no roadmap. Whether you're a musician, a painter, a playwright, a dancer, a costume designer, an actor, any of the things that you came to CFA to be, there is no manual. If there was, there'd be a lot more working artists. Pursuing a career in the arts means finding your own way. It means a lot of hard work, and while some of you may achieve instant success, if you're anything like me, it will mean hearing a lot of no's before you get to that yes. And like that couch, there will be a lot of doors that you won't be able to get into on your first try. For me, those no's, well, they started here. I was never the person that got all the leads in the play. In fact, While I was coming up here, I called my parents and I asked them, do you remember coming to see me perform up here? And they're like, oh yeah, we drove up in a snowstorm and we came up from New York and we were so excited to see you. I said, great, well, what were some of the roles? Because I can't seem to remember. And my amazing stepfather kind of cleared his throat and he said, well, I think the roles were, well, they were just a bit minor. But then my mom saw the disappointment in my face, and she's like, no, honey, I mean, you were amazing, and we came up, and I remember this one time, and you played The Wall. I said, The Wall? She goes, yes, The Wall, in A Midsummer Night's Dream. I mean, hats off to the parents who drove all the way up from New York in a snowstorm to see her daughter play The Wall. And while we're on the subject, can we take a moment to acknowledge the parents and guardians and teachers and all of the family and friends who have played an integral part on getting you. Woo! They were your earliest fans, your biggest cheerleaders, and many of them have made personal sacrifices to give you the gift of this education. It was with unwavering support of my family that I forged ahead in my minor roles, playing them to the best of my ability and learning from those experiences. And then in my senior year, I was cast in a lead, Viola in Twelfth Night. And I seized that opportunity and I poured everything into it that I'd learned in the 3 years of playing the smaller parts, and it was worth the wait, because that performance landed me an agent at William Morris. And just when I had reached the point where I was playing the lead at the Huntington Theater, and I had an agent, and I was feeling like I had found my place in the BU community, I graduated into a world full of no's. The first big no was from Win Hanman. He was a renowned acting coach in New York whose class I auditioned for shortly after I moved there, and he was known to be the best of the best. And his class was extremely selective. I mean, he had coached Dustin Hoffman and Richard Gere and Sam Shepard, but when I didn't get in, I was nevertheless disappointed. I mean, how was I even going to book a job if I couldn't even get into a class? So I was depressed, and I felt very rejected, and I headed over to my new manager's office, and I stepped onto the elevator, and I pushed the button, and I looked to my right, and who was standing next to me but Win Hanman? I looked, he pressed 10, I looked up, I saw, okay, I have 10 floors to convince him to let me into his class. I launched into my pitch about why I should be in his class. He walked off the elevator, he turned around, and he said, no. No. But you could audit the class. Audit? Honestly, I thought I was ready. I mean, I was trying to get into a class, not a Broadway play. But I showed up the next Monday, like he said. And I kept showing up and watching and learning until eventually I got in. A no to a yes. Could I have found another coach that would have taken me immediately? Maybe. Could I have gotten in later without taking the time to audit? Maybe. But in my experience, there have been very few times where taking a shortcut in this business and in life, and quite often they're not worth taking. I've also found that getting to the yes doesn't mean that the no's stop. As an artist's career is filled with starts and stops and ups and downs and yeses and nos. And I had had so many ups and downs that when I finally got a big yes and joined the cast of Grey's Anatomy as Dr. Teddy Altman, I'd played Teddy for 6 seasons and I thought I had finally made it into the world of yes. Until one day I decided I wanted to direct an episode. I had co-directed a movie with my husband and loved it. Several Grey's actors had directed episodes, and they had good experiences, so I thought I want to try. So for anyone who is thinking, I mean, Kim, how hard could it be to get a directing job on a show that you have been on for more than a decade? Let me tell you how the process works on Grey's. We have a producing director who hires all of the episode directors, Debbie Allen. Yes, award-winning dancer, choreographer, actor, singer, director who President Obama called a national treasure, Debbie Allen. Well, Debbie doesn't just hand you an episode, she makes you shadow a director to prove that you can do the job. It's like taking a final exam. So I ran to a castmate, Chandra Wilson, who's directed many episodes, and I asked her if I could shadow her. Well, when Debbie heard this, that I'd asked Chandra, she came to me and explained that I needed to ask her because she makes the assignments. So I asked, Debbie, can I direct an episode? And she said, no, all the slots were filled for the season. Okay, well, I had been accustomed to no's, and I like a challenge, and I really wanted to direct. So, the next season, I asked early. I said, Debbie, can I direct? Can I shadow? Well, when I say that I shadowed, she said yes. I went everywhere that Debbie did. I would squeeze myself between cameras and squish up against walls so that I could observe everything that she did without getting in her way. She is a notoriously hard worker and usually gets to set well before anyone else because she likes to prepare. Well, I was not going to let her get there first, so if she said she was getting there at 6:30, I would get there at 6. If she said she was getting there at 6, I would get there at 5:30. This wasn't some weird competition that I devised to beat Debbie to work. This was about a very experienced director giving me a huge opportunity to learn from her. And I was not going to take a minute of that for granted. And I watched, and I learned, and this season, when I saw on the production calendar Kim Raver directing episode 1911, I knew it was there because I had earned it and because I was ready. Now, some of you may question the validity of letting other people determine if and when you're ready. That's a fair point, but fair or not, you'll probably encounter this at some point during your career. It's part of the business of being an artist, and it may feel disappointing or annoying at times. However, like many other business aspects of being an artist, you will not be able to control it. But what you can do is go back to the work. You've spent 4 years earning your degree and honing your craft. No one can ever take that away from you. And because of your training here, because of the foundation that you have built here, because of the tools that this education has given you, you can always go back to the work. You work your craft, you make yourself more ready, and so often you'll find that in the long run, it's both more satisfying and more enduring to be undeniably ready than to be right now. Of course, there will be times when you want right now. You'll have stories that you want to tell right now. You'll have art that you want to make right now. You will have bills to pay right now. And you will see your friends and your peers coming into their moment, booking acting jobs and getting into the symphony, getting a show in a gallery. And in those times, it may be tempting to try to be like them, not like their work ethic or skill, but like them, trying to emulate the personal qualities and traits you think are bringing them their success. The challenge with that is, when we change who we are in order to be what we think other people want us to be, by definition, we give up a piece of ourselves. When we attempt to create what we think other people want instead of what we have to offer, we give up what makes us unique. What Grey's Anatomy creator Shonda Rhimes calls the secret sauce, the hum. Staying true to yourself and your art takes an enormous amount of faith and trust in your inner voice. It may mean having the patience to forego being right now in order to be right for you. That's certainly been my experience. You know, before the days of self-tapes, You would do your auditions in a room, and you would walk in, and maybe there would be 10 producers sitting behind a huge table. And when I was starting out after BU, I was not the actress that would walk into the room and book all the jobs. But then something clicked. I don't know whether it was because I felt so strongly about this particular character or because I was so beaten down by all of the excruciating no's. But I went into this audition and I didn't do what I thought that they wanted. I did my interpretation of the part and I got the job. That was the start of me realizing that I have to do what is me. I realized that not having the same personality traits as other actors makes me less than, or it made me feel different. It just made me me. I was second guessing what the producers wanted instead of giving them my vision, my artistry. And when I went back to my own voice, my own craft, I started booking job after job. It turns out no one can be the better version of you than you. Okay, but just to be clear, being yourself does not simply mean showing up and saying, hey, here I am, take me or leave me. It takes work to find and cultivate that inner voice. And you've started that here. Grey's Anatomy showrunner and CFA alum Krista Vernoff recently said, an arts education teaches you to think deeply and to get to know yourself profoundly. Your time here has helped spark that light within you. And how is up to you how you tend to it and you keep it alive. And also to be clear, being yourself, it doesn't mean that you resist opportunities to stretch and to grow. While I was in the acting program here, I took a painting class from an incredible teacher who was constantly pushing me to use bigger brushes and bolder strokes. He wanted me to make bigger and bolder choices. And when I could see that on the canvas, how it enhanced my paintings, I began to try that in my acting. It improved both the outcome and the experience. And so for someone whose natural tendency is to play it safe, this was a really important lesson, and I try regularly to remind myself of it. David Bowie once said, complacency is the death of creativity. And if we're ever tempted to forget, the business of being an artist is right there to remind us. All of those no's are part of what keeps us from being complacent. When my kids were younger, my husband and I made this tough decision to uproot our kids and move our dog, our kids, and everything to London so that I could reprise my role as national security expert / Jack Bauer's girlfriend, Audrey, on the 24 reboot. We were loving it there. And 5 episodes into filming, one day, I walked past the prop department studio. I was on my way to hair and makeup, and I noticed that they were building a prop coffin. Now, a lot of characters died on 24, but most ended up in a ditch or a trunk of a car or something other than a coffin. So for days, all of the actors were buzzing in speculation. Who was going to end up in that prop box? Cut to the table read, where we're reading page by page until we learn, spoiler alert, the coffin was for Audrey. I packed up my family and the dog, and back we came home. For the vast majority of artists, jobs are going to come and go. That's the nature of our work. And for any Grey's Anatomy fans who saw Thursday night's finale, stay tuned. Okay, let's review. You've just spent 4 years studying and sharpening your craft. You've passed countless exams and projects to get to this day. And now your convocation speaker is telling you that the reward for all of this hard work is a lifetime of hard work, soul-crushing rejection, and zero job security. You may no longer be wondering, how did you do it? And instead, why would anyone do this? but you know why. Because when you've done the work, and when you've studied and rehearsed and prepared and crafted, and when the others you're working with have done the same, all of the pieces fall into place, and it's extraordinary. The work suddenly feels effortless. It's like a plane lifting off the ground. There's a hum to it. And for me, there is no greater place to be in that hum. I think you all know what I mean. You wouldn't have made it this far if you didn't. That hum is immense joy and creativity. It's art. And the world needs art. It needs music, it needs stories, it needs beauty, now more than ever. Right? The best art brings us together by creating a common narrative of what it means to be human in our moment in history. It helps us better understand who we are individually and as a collective. And as a class that experienced college during a global pandemic and wildly divisive times, you have a unique perspective on the importance of community. One that may feel the need to protect and nurture it more intensely and urgently than the generations before you. Use it to fuel your work. When you encounter no's, let it motivate you to find ways to turn them into yeses. When you feel jaded, let it propel you out of complacency. When you feel lost and scared or unable, let it inspire you to put forward the best version of you, the one that only you can be. Tomorrow, you start a new chapter of your story, and I could not be more excited for you. As challenging and as frustrating as it will be sometimes, I am proof that it can also be extraordinary and fulfilling. In fact, looking back from the times I left to BU to now, I would argue that the process of getting to yes, the process of sharpening your craft, the process of getting to the hum that ultimately makes it all so worthwhile, and maybe that is the most useful message I can offer you today. But measure your couch is a very close second. Congratulations, thank you all for having me here, and let's hear it for the class of 2023.